Hi everyone, it's Gary Nicholson here for the Mountain Weather Information Service. This is your Planning Outlook video updated on Tuesday the 16th of January. Now overall it's staying cold heading into this weekend. The familiar story of snow and hail showers in the forecast for the next few days. Those fading as we go through into Saturday though, with a better crisp winter's day in prospect, but the risk of going downhill on Sunday, and quite tricky with the details then beyond into next week. Let's have a look through temperatures then. This is the 850 millibar chart. That corresponds to the highest tops in Scotland. Generally, it's around 4,500 feet in the atmosphere or so. At that level, we're around -5 or -6. This is through Wednesday. Then a frontal system comes through on Wednesday night, bringing a bump of milder air across southern parts of Britain, across the Lake District and Pennines. You might find the freezing level within that is still 400 or 500 metres, so the scope for some snowfalls quite persistent over a good many hours through the night into Thursday. Scotland, you can see, never really gets any of that milder air in. That system clears away eastwards through Thursday daytime, quite a powerful one as that goes into central parts of Europe, and we're then in that west of the airstream once again through Thursday and Friday. Temperatures staying down, -5 or below on the higher Scottish Munros. Terrain is frozen from low levels up. You're looking at freezing levels at around 300 to 500 metres, maybe a bit higher around some of the coastal hills, maybe particularly towards Wales. Towards the weekend, then, we see the wind flow just turn a little bit more northwesterly. We stay with a cold air mass into Saturday. Gradually, slightly less cold air is encroaching its way in from the southwest, and we might find as we go through into Sunday that the higher tops are not quite as desperately cold as they have been in previous days, but not a great deal of change of temperature with height, so essentially you're staying with widespread frozen terrain. A lift in temperature, though, is trying to get in from the southwest, and it's that awkward battleground that will then take place into the start of next week. So we'll come back to the ideas for next week in a moment. This is just a look at the storm system coming through on Wednesday night into Thursday, though. That brings with it the risk of severe gales, even to low levels overnight for central and southern Britain, but the scope for some snowfalls across the Pennines, the Lakes and the south of Scotland. Still some uncertainty on the exact track of the system and therefore how far north or south that extent of snow gets. But as cold air is drawn into the back of the system as it moves through into the North Sea later in the night, it could bring that snow level down further onto the Pennines. Then it's just a story of going back to snow showers coming in from the west. For the record, there's the synoptic chart for Wednesday with a similar day to what we've seen on Tuesday, really. That cold westerly wind, a widely gale force on many of the mountains, and snow and hail showers coming in from the west. Frequent around western areas, maybe just losing their intensity a little bit as the air at higher levels in the atmosphere just becomes less cold. The incoming low then can just be seen approaching from the west. And as we move on to the synoptic chart for Thursday, that low having moved very quickly eastwards, it's almost off the map in towards Denmark by this stage, fronts having trailed through and a waving frontal system into northern France by that time, and it's back to that west of the airstream in place. The dashed black lines indicating troughs where we may see showers just organise themselves together, where convection is just that little bit more organised. So snow and hail in some parts of Wales, maybe western Scotland too, and the western Pennines could be frequent over a good many hours. There's Friday's chart. Low pressure is centred to the north of Scotland. We've got a similar picture then with snow and hail showers coming in from the west. It could be isolated thunder and lightning again through Thursday and Friday for that matter, with that cold air digging back in at higher levels. That creates the instability in the atmosphere for that risk of hail and thunder. And it's eastern regions again of Scotland and eastern parts of the Pennines that will fare best for staying drier for longer, with some sunshine coming through at times. Now by Saturday it looks as though that low has just opened out a little bit and pressure has started to build, which could well give a very fine day for a wintry picture across most areas. It stays cold as we saw on those earlier charts, terrain then frozen from low levels up, with plenty of sunshine around. The air should be very clear, having had that Arctic origin from earlier in the week, and the winds most likely dropping lighter. Just watch the timing of how soon the wind drops, but should be an improving story through the day at the very least, and a better picture than what we've seen through most of this week at least. Fronts are trying to edge their way back in from the Atlantic. An area of low pressure is just appearing there, and they may start to encroach in either very late on Saturday or into Sunday. So treated very cautiously. There's the chance we've got for Sunday at the moment. And at the very least, I think the idea of some fronts encroaching in from the west is how things are going to go. So a deteriorating day to some degree, with greater amounts of cloud cover, maybe strengthening winds in some places. And the risk of some snow developing across western Scotland, where that front is trying to come in there. We've still got that cold air in place. And maybe also a watch for parts of Wales too, as the waving front towards the southwest may start to have some influence in here. That might start to bring a lift in temperatures and freezing levels, but it could well be that some snow develops at first before anything does begin to turn to rain, and a chance that if that milder air gets kept away towards Biscay, then that milder air never quite gets in at all, which is a possibility. So scope for some snowfall, mainly across western regions. Your best bet for staying dry and bright is probably towards the northern side of the Cairngorms, for example, and maybe eastern parts of the Pennines and into the Scottish borders. So where does that leave us going into next week? Well, all the models slightly different on the computations at this stage, so confidence is pretty low, and it's a typical theme really. When we get cold air in place, they do tend to struggle with what to do with it and how long to keep it in existence, and sometimes they're a bit too keen to bring milder air back in before it actually does. This is how things look off one of the computer models around Sunday, and it was that idea of a low trying to be to the west of us, fronts trying to encroach in from the Atlantic as we just saw. Now, some indications would bring milder air gradually into many areas as we go into the start of next week. Some don't though, and this indication, it might be a bit overdeveloped, but it brings an area of low pressure across the country. Yes, temperatures a bit higher than they've been in previous days, but it never really draws any milder air across us. Essentially, the air would come around the back of that low from the north or the northeast, and any lift in freezing level or temperatures may be quite short-lived. What it then does is build pressure from the Atlantic. It connects with an area of high pressure that's over Scandinavia and takes low pressure away into central southeastern parts of Europe. And as the week progresses, that tries to feed an easterly wind in across northern Europe and keeps much of the British Isles into cold conditions. Maybe, again, just temperatures on some of the mountains lifting a little bit where the air is trying to come in from the south on western mountains. But if that easterly pattern can establish itself, if pressure can build, then we might still be looking at generally cold conditions as the week goes on. Now, I wouldn't rule out something trying to come in from the Atlantic at least for a time next week, but if it does, it may well be a short-lived period, so there is scope for some freeze and thaw cycles, even up to fairly high levels. But I think the idea of high pressure over Scandinavia being the main factor further ahead is the one that we need to watch for. This is the 7-day pressure anomaly that takes you through until the 29th of January. And it shows high pressure extensive around polar regions. It's that blocking regime that we've talked about in previous videos. Low pressure is out over the Atlantic, but struggling to make inroads into what would be a cold easterly air mass coming in across Europe and towards us. That may well be where we go towards the end of the month, but tricky just getting those details at this stage. So hopefully that's not sitting on the fence too much for you. It's an awkward one as we go into next week. We'll update that full outlook in the next planning video on Friday for you. Don't forget, of course, all the local details for your mountain areas updated every single day in the written files on the website. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.